Hello, everyone. While we wait for people to continue to join us, I'm just going to take another minute before we start today. Thanks for joining us again. Okay, we have a pretty full room already, so I'm going to get started. So good day to everyone. Thank you again for joining us live. And thank you all also to those of you that are catching the recording of this at a later date. By way of introduction, my name is Thomas Maldonado-Reese. I'm the Assistant Director of Enrollment Requirements here at the Harvard Division of Continuing Education. And today I'll be presenting on the topic of understanding enrollment requirements for fall at the Harvard Extension School. This webinar will be recorded and shared with all of you who have RSVP'd to the event so that you can review it at a later time, slow it down, pause it, rewind, whatever you need to do to learn this information. We'll also be sharing a copy of the slide deck in a PDF format with you as well. That means that any links that you see here will be accessible to you in that slide deck as well. A note on our format for the webinar today. So I'm going to be presenting on the topic of enrollment requirements. These are things that you have to do either pre-registration or post-registration to successfully enroll in courses here at Harvard Extension School this fall. We've collected some questions through the RSVP to this event, which I'll be going over at the end. Additionally, we'll reserve time at the end for any additional questions you may have. So if you're looking at your Zoom toolbar at the bottom, you should see a Q&A function, which would allow you to submit questions that we can go over as we get to that Q&A section. I do ask, because I know many of you will have highly specific personal circumstances that you want some answers to. I'm going to reserve this space for really the more general information that's going to be applicable to everybody. So if you have a really highly individualized question about your personal circumstances, we're going to be sharing our email addresses with you later in the presentation, and I would encourage you to ask those questions there. Throughout this presentation, I'm joined by my enrollment requirements team, who are going to be monitoring those questions as we go along. And so I do want to give a shout out to Nina, Lauren, Jaslyn, and Michael for their help during this event, and also Leslie and Tony for helping set us up today. This is the second half of a two-part series to prepare for the upcoming fall registration period. You can get more detailed information on registration processes, such as setting up your MyDCE student account, navigating the course catalog, and paying for courses by viewing the How to Prepare for Fall Registration webinar that my colleague Sean Cleary hosted last week. And so again, the link to that recording is going to be embedded in this slide when we send it out to you later. Fall registration is fast approaching, so I'm really glad to have all of you here live today. We expect pre-registration, which is required every term before registration, to open sometime later this week. So there's some important dates to keep in mind. Friday, July 15th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, course registration will open to all admitted degree candidates. And then on Monday, July 18th at 9 a.m., everyone else can then begin registering for courses in the fall. And we have a pretty tight window during which registration is available. So keep in mind, registration will close Thursday evening, August 25th at 11:59 Eastern Time. So here's our agenda. First, what are enrollment requirements? So we're going to go over the general categories of what we're going to talk about today. And then we're going to go over topics such as English proficiency, placement exams, such as the critical reading and writing skills test, the math placement test, We're going to go over immunization requirements, including COVID-19 vaccination requirements, and some general guidelines for international students who are seeking to enroll in courses with us. Like I said, we'll have some time for some FAQs, some questions that you may have as well, and I'll leave you with our contact information before the end. So let's start. What are enrollment requirements? So in brief, we have 4 general buckets that you should be aware of. There's the English proficiency requirement. This is a pre-registration activity. So for those students who identify as a non-native English speaker, in order for you to be able to demonstrate sufficient mastery of English to succeed in courses, you do have to meet this requirement. Another pre-registration activity are the placement exams, critical reading and writing skills test, and the math placement exam. These are really to ensure that you have the necessary skills to be successful in a select number of courses. As far as post-registration activity is concerned, there are immunization requirements. These are in compliance with state of Massachusetts and Harvard University regulations, where you must provide evidence of inoculation against certain communicable diseases, and this includes COVID-19 as well. And then generally to be aware of, international students should know that there are terms and conditions for any existing visa they may be on or any visa that they're seeking to get, and how taking courses here may have an impact on that. So we'll start at the beginning with the English proficiency requirement. The main thing to know is English is the language of instruction at Harvard Extension School. So when you are creating your student profile, if you indicate that your native language is not English, you must provide proof of English proficiency before you'll be permitted to enroll in any Harvard Extension School course, or even before you could take the critical reading and writing skills test. There's a couple options available to you on how to meet this requirement. The first is submitting a qualifying transcript, and the second would be to submit a qualifying test score. And let me get into exactly what the definition of those two things are. So I said a qualifying transcript. When I say qualifying, there's really 3 things we're looking for on a transcript. The first is that we're looking for a date of graduation from either a high school, bachelor's, master's, or research-based doctorate degree like a PhD. Second, we're looking for the institution that you graduated from to be located in one of the 7 approved countries you see listed here, whether it's the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Republic of Ireland, or Singapore, although there is an important caveat with Singapore, in that if you're going to submit a transcript for a secondary school, it must indicate completion of the SIPCAL, or Singapore Integrated Program, with A-level exams. And another reason why we want a transcript and not a diploma is because we want to see evidence that you've spent at least 1 year of degree credit in an English-speaking environment. Now, important things to keep in mind. We're not able to review paper transcripts at this moment. So via mail or courier, we would prefer that you would much rather send them to us electronically. And we'll go over what that submission process looks like. Like I said, we're looking for dates of graduation, which means that degrees in progress are not considered. Additionally, the International Baccalaureate diplomas will not be considered. Now, if you are a student who does not have one of these qualifying transcripts to meet the English proficiency requirement, your next option is going to be to produce a satisfactory test score instead. And so there are 4 main test scores to be aware of. The first is the Toefl. And I want to be clear, when I'm talking about the Toefl, I'm talking about the internet-based Toefl IBT, including the IBT Home Edition, where the minimum score that we're looking for is 100. Importantly, that score must be no more than 2 years old. A second option is the IELTS exam. There, the minimum score that we're looking for is a 7.0. And again, no more than 2 years old. The third and the newest one in the sphere of English proficiency exams is Duolingo's English test. There, the minimum score we're looking for is a 125, and different from the rest, the score must have been received within the past year. And then finally, there's the Pearson test for English, where the minimum exam would be a 70, and again, no more than 2 years old. Now, our staff verifies each score that we receive with the official testing organization. So please note, we are checking to see whether or not these are verifiable scores when you submit them. An additional note, when it comes to the Toefl, we do not accept the institutional Toefl, also known as the Toefl ITP. We also do not accept the My Best Toefl score. In a similar vein, we do not accept the IELTS general training scores or the IELTS indicator test as proof of English proficiency. So if you're a student who doesn't have a satisfactory transcript and you don't yet have a valid qualifying test score, you will have to take one of these tests and submit a qualifying score to us before you'll be able to register in an extension school course or be able to take that critical reading and writing skills test, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So let's say you have your test score or you have your transcript and you're trying to submit it to us. So let's talk about submission. So the first place you're going to want to go is either to your organization's official reporting system and have it sent to Harvard Extension School. Importantly, don't send it to just Harvard undergraduate admissions. We're not going to be able to find it there. For the Toefl in particular, there is an institution code 4358 here that you can use to find exactly where you need to submit it. But your other option, if you don't go through the official organization's reporting systems, is to submit to us a PDF copy of your official score report. And so in order for us to get that PDF, what you're going to want to do is to go to your MyDCE account, which you see here. You see a version of mine, and you're going to want to go to that document uploader button. If you have questions about what is MyDCE, how do I get to here, I would reference you back to the webinar my colleague Sean Cleary did on how to prepare for registration, where he walks through exactly how to set this up and a walkthrough of actually how to navigate it as well. So, but for you, you know all of that already. You've gotten to MyDCE and you're clicking on that document uploader button. It's going to take you to a page that looks like this. It's an upload form. And it's a lot of information to take in. So I want to direct your eyes to just these three particular arrows first. So looking at number 1, that red box underneath documents, that's going to be a drop-down menu. And from there, you're going to want to select either English proficiency transcript or English proficiency test score, depending on what kind of document you're trying to send us. Once you've selected your document type, you're going to click that paper clip where you see number 2 at, and you're going to locate your PDF score report or transcript. Submitting our English proficiency document, how do you know that you've been successful? So not only underneath that previously submitted documents header will you see that your document is listed there, you're also going to receive an email notification that also tells you that we've successfully received your document. One important thing that I do want to mention, don't submit your document multiple times. We often have students submit 3 or 4 times the same document because they're just not sure. It does take a couple of minutes before you're going to get that email confirmation. And the more times that you submit the same document, the longer it takes us to get through the volume that we receive. So I do urge you, do it once and we've probably gotten it. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is that there is an early deadline by which you need to submit your English proficiency documents. So even though course registration ends on Thursday, August 25th, you need to submit any English proficiency documents before the end of Thursday, August 18th. So long as you submit before the end of the day on the 18th, we guarantee that we will review your document before registration closes. If you submit your documents the day after, we can't no longer guarantee that we're going to review it in time. We will do our best. We work from oldest to newest, trying to get everyone in. But if you do submit after the 18th, you run the risk of us only being able to review it for a future term semester like spring semester. Okay, so that was English proficiency. Now let's talk about everyone's favorite topic of placement exams. Now, I know folks can often get anxious when they hear about placement exams. So I hope that talking through these will make you feel a little less anxious and a little more confident about your ability to tackle these tests. And so first, we're going to talk about the critical reading and writing skills test, which you're also going to hear me refer to as the CRUISE test. So I'll go between both names, honestly. Okay, so critical reading and writing skills test, CRUISE test, much more comfortable for me. It is a free placement test. There's no monetary cost. You don't have to pay anything to do it. And it was designed by Division of Continuing Education faculty, really to assess what is your degree of ability to succeed in a writing intensive course. It's not required of all courses. It's really only required for some, and we're going to go over that list in a moment. And any degree or prospective degree candidate is going to run into this test at some point. Or if you're just a learner who's really interested in one of the courses that has this as a prerequisite, you're going to run into it as well. I said this during the English proficiency part, and I'll repeat it now. If you're a non-native English speaker, you must meet English proficiency before you'll be able to take this exam. So what is the exam? This is the whole exam. In 60 minutes, you have to read one passage, you have to answer 5 multiple choice questions, and you have to write 1 short essay. That's it. It's not incredibly long. It is held only to that 60-minute period. I do know students have asked about, is that enough time to write the essay? But the time is really in mind with how they evaluate the ability of you completing that essay. This is what you'll be facing. 1 passage, 5 multiple choice questions, 1 short answer, essay. Now, I'm not going to read through this whole slide, and I know it's a lot of like words on a page, but what I wanted to do is just list out for you the courses that today have the CRUISE test listed as a prerequisite. This list could change, and I would always tell students, look at the prerequisites of your courses when you're looking for a course to register in to make sure that it has this or doesn't have this as a requirement. But I wanted to show everyone here in attendance what courses currently have it as a prerequisite, just so that you know now as you're sitting here, ooh, I do want to take that econ course, or, oh, I was thinking about taking that management course, just so that you know whether this is going to be applicable to you for this fall registration. So how do you prepare for the test? So there's no practice test. We can't give you like an example of like what the test looks like. The best thing that we have instead available to you is something called the Harvard Extension Ready Writing Tool. It is a free, self-guided, self-paced, basically online module course that you can enroll in yourself. All you need is to have a Harvard key, and you would be able to access this tool. And throughout this self-guided tour, you'll be able to review some of the basics in writing preparedness topics. So this includes things like how to summarize, how to create an argument, a refresher on basic grammar, and tips on how to express yourself clearly. The overall tool has a whole bunch of modules associated with it, and you can complete it in part or in full, depending upon what you would like to do. It's really up to you. And it features a combination of text-based instruction, video tutorials, guided assessments, and interactive quizzes. Again, this is a free tool. It's not required that you do this before you take the CRUISE test, but I think it can help you feel more confident in your skills before walking into the test. Ultimately, once you do decide to take the CRUISE test, you should focus on 2 things. 1, find a quiet space to work. And 2, ensure that you have a stable internet connection for the duration of the 60-minute test. So where do you go to access this test once you feel comfortable? We're going back to my DCE. So I showed you before just the top bar, that's where I highlighted. But if you scroll down when you get to your My DCE page, you'll see in that left-hand corner where I've highlighted in red here, this box that says online services. You're gonna wanna click there and it's gonna take you to another page that looks like this. This is the main menu of online services, which houses both of the placement tests that we're gonna talk about today. So if you just hover your mouse over placement tests, you'll see this same pop-up that I'm showing you here. And you simply have to click take the test of critical reading and writing in order to navigate to the test. The first thing that you're going to see once you click on that link is you're going to be greeted with basically an academic honesty agreement that says that there's no one else in your room that's going to be helping you. You're not cheating while you're simultaneously taking the exam, what you're used to when it comes to academic honesty agreements. And then as you scroll down, you're going to get to the actual click to begin the test. So there's only one other thing that you need to make a decision about before you begin. And that's, it will ask you, are you taking this requirement to fulfill a particular degree that you're seeking to pursue, or because there's a particular kind of course subject that you're seeking to take? So that drop-down menu, you're going to want to select an answer from, and then you'll click begin the test. That's when your 60 minutes will start to allow you to read, answer those 5 multiple choice questions, and submit that short essay. Okay, results of the test. So results of the test won't be available to you immediately. They do get reviewed by writing faculty before any scores are released. And I'm going to talk at the very end about the schedule on which those scores are released. Importantly, it's just pass fail. There's no letter grade or number grade associated with it. If you do not pass on your first attempt at taking the cruise test, what you will see in your results section is that the faculty from the writing program will be recommending a particular expository writing course or Expo course that you should take. That Expo course is based upon your performance on the test, them thinking this is exactly what we think this person would need in order to succeed and develop the skills to do well. Now, you can retake the test if you wish, but you only get 2 attempts total in your lifetime as a student. And if you are seeking to retake the test, it can only be in a future term. So if you take the test today for the fall and do not pass, you wouldn't be able to take it again until a future term for spring, for example. And in the event that you do not pass the cruise test after both of those attempts, that recommended course that they're suggesting for you then becomes a required course that you must take in order to continue in the sequence to take these writing intensive courses. All test scores are final and they're not up for debate. But you're probably interested in knowing where you would go to see your test score. So I'm navigating back to that same online services page that we looked at a moment ago, still hovering over placement tests. You can see view placement test scores. This is where you would go to be able to see one of 2 options. And I've highlighted them here in green and red, just so that you can see what passing and non-passing looks like. So that top box where you see underneath score the letter Y, that's an example of what a passing test would look like. And on the bottom, underneath score, you see that letter N, that indicates that this individual did not pass. And you can also see in text there that the graders recommended this student to take Expo E15 before proceeding with taking the test again or moving forward. Now, you might be someone who wants to just avoid the exam altogether. Maybe you don't like the high pressure 60-minute exam format. Maybe that's just not for you. Maybe you admit that you would actually like to continue to brush up on your reading and writing skills and perhaps take courses to meet these requirements instead. And that's what I have listed out here. Each of those courses I mentioned earlier in that slide has a prerequisite course that you could take if you didn't want to take the exam at all. So those are listed here. So for example, if I'm looking in that bottom left-hand box, I'm really interested in journalism 100. So I might take Expo 42A, writing in the humanities, instead of having to deal with the cruise test at all. You will note here that Expo 25 is unique in that it has a prerequisite course itself, which is Expo 15. So if you understand correctly, you would have to take Expo 15 in order to take Expo 25 in order to move on to one of those econ or management courses if you weren't to take Expo 34 business rhetoric. In all cases, for all of these alternate courses that you could take in lieu of the exam, you must earn a B or higher for it to count towards that prerequisite requirement. Schedule. So I said earlier before that the results of these exams are released all at once on particular days. And so this is the schedule that you would need to know about. And it's fortunate that many of you are here today, because I think it'll help you make some informed decisions about fall registration. So here you'll see, if you were to take the test between June 3rd and July 7th, this is the last period that the test will be administered with results available before registration actually begins for all students on the 18th. So just to put a finer point on that, today is July 6th. If you were to take this test today or tomorrow, July 7th, you are guaranteed to have your results to you before July 15th in time for registration to start. Otherwise, you could take the test between July 8th to July 21st, and your test results would be available to you on July 29th. Or you could take your test between July 22nd and August 11th, and your test score report would be available on August 19th. And that would be the last testing period available for fall registration. So we got through one placement exam. We have one more to go through, and this one I think will cause you even less anxiety, and it is the math placement test. So the reason why I say I think this will cause you less anxiety is because it is a highly recommended online test, but it is not a requirement. For each of the following courses, pre-calc, calc 1 and 2, multivariate, microeconomic theory and strategy, conflict and cooperation, and economics, sorry. This diagnostic test will determine what your math skills are and see which of these courses you would be best suited to take given your knowledge thus far. And the reason why I bolded highly recommend is because when you enroll in any one of these courses, the instructors and the teaching assistants are going to assume that you already have all of the prerequisite knowledge to succeed in these courses and are going to teach accordingly. And so that means that they're not going to stop and review earlier math skills in order to prepare you for this course. They're not going to spend their time in one-on-one office hours reviewing earlier material to make sure that you're successful here. This test is really to ensure that you are set up for success yourself and know the prerequisite material to do well when starting in any one of these courses. So where do you go? It's real similar. We're going right back to online services. This is where both of our placement tests are. You're going to once again hover over that placement tests text to see that math placement test. You're going to be greeted by the same box that lists all of the courses that it can point to if you're seeking to enroll in to make sure that you are suitably prepared to succeed in these courses. When you click that Take Math Test button, it's actually going to redirect you to a page that looks like this. This page is dedicated to the math placement exam. There are some technical requirements for your computer and browser that you should review before you proceed to the test. They have a quick FAQ as well, which I would suggest that you read. The one thing that is very different about the math placement as opposed to the critical reading and writing skills test is that as soon as you finish this test, you will have your results, and it will tell you what courses you are prepared to take. So there's a bit of instant gratification about it. There's fewer consequences around it because there's none of that. If you don't pass, then you must do this. This is really for you to understand where you will best be served should you be seeking one of those math or economics courses. Lots of dates I know, which is why I'm so happy I'm sending this to you all as well in the slides. But the math placement for this fall is going to be open on July 25th. It starts at 4 a.m. and it's really only available between 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. each day. And there's no real shut off for fall, except for the fact that registration will close on Thursday, August 25th. So of course you would like to do this well ahead of time to make sure that you have your result to know and guide your decision on making or enrolling in one of these math or economics courses. Okay, we got through placement exams. Next, we're going up to immunization requirements. So the state of Massachusetts, like I said, and Harvard University require students to demonstrate inoculation against some communicable diseases, and we'll go over that some in a little bit, but especially COVID-19. In fact, every student must submit evidence of COVID-19 vaccination in order to participate on any course with an on-campus presence. And I want to be really clear what I mean by on-campus presence. It really means if it's an on-campus only course, or if it's a on-campus course with an online option and you plan to come to campus to attend some part or all of that class. If it is an online course with either a mandatory weekend on campus or an active learning weekend, in each of these cases, we need demonstration and evidence that you are fully inoculated against COVID-19. And what I mean by fully inoculated is that you have a full series of either FDA or World Health Organization approved COVID vaccines. So that might be 2 shots or a single shot, depending upon the manufacturer. And most importantly, a booster shot, especially when it came to our most recent Harvard Summer School. That was one thing that I know we got lots of questions about. Folks that had maybe the first or second shot in a series didn't yet have the booster. We require that you have your series completed and your booster completed by the time that you're coming to campus. To verify that you have completed your vaccination requirement, you must upload a copy of either a vaccine card or whatever documentation you may have from a medical professional verifying your vaccination status to University Health Services patient portal. And we're going to take a look at what that looks like in a moment. If you fail to provide evidence of your COVID vaccination status within 7 days of registration, you risk being removed from on-campus courses even after courses begin. And the reason why we say within 7 days of registration is because once you register and once you claim your Harvard key, it can take 1 to 2 business days before that patient portal is going to be accessible to you. And then at that point, you'll be able to submit your information. So we've given you a window, 7 days of registration, or you risk removal from your on-campus courses. Like I said, everything must be submitted through the patient portal. Please do not email us medical documents directly via email. Instead, you're going to go to that patient portal, which looks just like this, and log in with your Harvard key in order to access it. Once you've logged in, this is what the home page looks like. I'm chiefly talking about that top box where you see Home For. And on the front page of this portal, you have the option and the button to click to enter your COVID-19 vaccination information. There's 2 things you need to do on this page. The first is you need to upload a PDF copy of whichever document or vaccine card you'll be using to evidence that you have completed your vaccination requirement. The second thing is you're going to add the dates and the manufacturer for each shot that you had by clicking on that Add Immunization button. So you'll be clicking that 2 or 3 times, depending. If the upload does not work, when you go to upload something, it is most likely to do with just the file size of what the image is. So just keep that in mind. If you're trying to submit multiple pages of a document, maybe split it up. You can upload more than once. It's just no one file can be greater than 4 megabytes. Additionally, it may be the case that you need to pursue an exemption for either a medical reason or a religious reason. And I want you to let you know that those requests are reviewed by University Health Services staff and clinicians directly. So if that is something of interest to you or applicable to you, those requests for medical or religious exemptions are completed by filling out a vaccine exemption form, which will be linked here in this slide, and then emailing it directly to University Health Services. Again, please do not email that to our office when you get our information at the end of this slideshow. And also note, if you are unvaccinated and on campus, you may be subject to additional public health measures, whether that be masking or whether that be testing above and beyond what is required of vaccinated individuals. Okay, so then there's a whole lot of other vaccination requirements for a smaller population of students. So when we're talking about full-time students registered in at least 12 credits, or if you're an international student on a visa of any kind, the state of Massachusetts also requires that we verify that you are inoculated against the following communicable diseases that are listed here. So that includes the measles, mumps, rubella, or the MMR vaccine. We're looking for 2 doses on or after your first birthday. Additionally, there is a spacing requirement that they be separated by at least 28 days. Second one we're looking for is tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis. We're looking for 1 dose after January 1st of 2013. Note that there is a tetanus diphtheria vaccine out there. It's just those first 2 that doesn't have the third one in it. You must have received the vaccine that includes all 3 components to be qualified. The third communicable disease is hepatitis B. This can be started at any age. There are 3 doses that need to be completed. The second dose typically comes 28 days after the first. Third dose comes at least 8 weeks between the second and the third. Alternatively, you can also submit a titer or a positive serological test to prove inoculation or immunization from this disease as well. Varicella is another disease that you would have to provide immunization information for. There are 2 doses of this that you would have to provide us information on. There's 2 alternatives here. There is a waiver for those who were born in the US before 1980, or if a medical professional signs off that you have the history of the chickenpox illness, this could be waived for you as well. New to the university, we do require a flu vaccine. So 1 dose after July 1st. So that's something that could be obtained today. The reason why I put a bunch of stars next to this one is because this is the one vaccine that you have until the end of the calendar year to provide us evidence for. So while we do recommend that you submit it as soon as you receive it or as soon as possible, for the flu vaccine alone, you actually have through the fall to verify that you've received that. And then finally, the meningococcal vaccine. This is only required for students that are 21 years of age or younger, and they must have received at least 1 dose after the age of 16, which is a unique requirement in the state of Massachusetts law. That's a lot of information. I don't expect you all to memorize it. On our immunization form itself that you would complete with a medical professional, it will list out all of these same specifics of dosing, dose spacing, dates of when they must have been administered by, so that you and your medical professional can understand clearly what we're trying to collect here. In order to submit this, this immunization form can also be submitted through MyDCE in that same document uploader that we talked about when we talked about English proficiency. I will note this is one form that I don't have linked to in this presentation. It's not going to become available until registration begins on July 15th. So we will update this slide later, but also please review our website to be able to find that form. And before I continue down the path of how to upload this documentation, I do want to say the consequence. So when I was talking about COVID earlier, I had said that the consequence of not submitting COVID vaccination information is that you would be withdrawn from on-campus courses. The consequence of not submitting these other vaccine information is that if there is an outbreak on campus of any of those diseases I listed, so just to go back, if there is an outbreak of any of these diseases, then you may be administratively withdrawn if we don't have evidence in order to keep everyone safe and healthy in the community. So back to submission. In that My DCE page, you're going to again go to that document uploader icon. You're going to once again come to this document upload form, and I bring your attention to those same 3 spots that we talked about earlier. Except for this time, under documents, you're going to select the immunization document type from the drop-down menu. You're going to once again click on that pay-per-click attachment to find the PDF of the immunization form on your local device, and you'll click that check mark to submit. Once again, you will see this listed under the previously submitted documents title once you've submitted it and you know you've done it correctly, if within the next 5 to 10 minutes you receive an email confirmation verifying our receipt of the document as well. Lastly, important thing, and I know this may be confusing, but COVID vaccination information must be submitted to Central University Health Services patient portal. All this other vaccination information is submitted directly to us at the Division of Continuing Education and at Harvard Extension School through this form. Please do not switch them and send your other immunization information to University Health Services or send your COVID information to us through this portal. Doing so will just cause some confusion and take us a little bit longer to clear up so that we know that you are actually compliant with all of these different rules and regulations. Okay, so English proficiency, placement tests, immunization requirements, check, check, check. Next, we're going to do some basic guidelines for international students to be aware of as well. Generally, international students can fall into one of the following 3 situations. One, they could already be in possession of a non-tourist visa. So this could be a student visa, an F1 visa, or a J1 visa. They could have a work visa, like an H1B. The second category is you could be someone who currently possesses a tourist visa. Those are the B1, B2, or ESTA. And these are folks who intend to enter the US for a reason other than study, typically recreational purposes or vacation purposes. And then the third group of international students are those who don't yet possess a visa of any kind. And so we're going to talk about all 3 of those groups and what to know if you're seeking to enroll in classes this fall. So if you're already a visa holder, but it's not a tourist visa, it's like a work visa or another student visa, the important part that I want to just start with is that this Harvard Extension School staff is not immigration officials. So therefore, it is your responsibility as the visa holder to discuss with your visa sponsor, be it your employer, be it a university, whomever, to see whether your unique status permits you to enroll in courses on a part-time basis here at Harvard Extension School. It is ultimately in that conversation with that sponsor that you're going to be able to understand what you can and cannot do. However, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, publishes a handy little fact sheet called Non-Immigrants Who Can Study, with general guidelines for what the restrictions may be for you to be able to study here in the U.S. on a part-time basis. And it breaks down each of the different visa categories and what might be possible for you. Depending on your situation, you may have a range of options available to you. You might be able to do on-campus study. You might be able to do online with an active weekend. You may only be interested in online study. Ultimately, you should be having that conversation with your sponsor to make sure that you understand how to stay within the guidelines and terms and conditions of your existing visa. However, if you do have questions after speaking with your sponsor, if you do have questions after reviewing this information from ICE, and you just want another brain to help you think through it, you can email us at visas@extension.harvard.edu, and we can certainly hear you out and try to help you navigate as best as we can as well. Now, the second category we talked about are people who are currently holding a tourist visa. So these are folks who are attempting to enter the US in order for some like vacation or recreational activity. So these are B1, B2, or ESTAs is the language that you would hear. And the really important thing to know is that if you attempt to enter the US as a tourist, but for the purposes of earning college credit, by taking one of these like 4-credit extension school courses, that's a violation of US visa policy. The biggest risk is that you may be denied entry to the United States, or even further, you may be denied any future visa if they find out that this is something you're attempting to do. And it does not matter whether you are a new course taker, a non-degree student, if you're an admitted degree candidate, no one may enter the US for college credit on a tourist visa. So what is available to you? Well, non-credit, fully online courses may be only possible if your plans to travel to the US are unaffiliated with your course of study. So if you're headed somewhere else in the US and that's why you're holding your visa, you could take an online class that's not for credit and it's completely unaffiliated with your course of study, and that should be permissible. But I do say, if this raises questions for you or you wish to discuss your situation in more detail, you can certainly contact us again at visas@extension.harvard.edu. And then there are those students who don't possess any active visa at all yet. And so the really important thing to know here is that Harvard Extension School, especially for the fall and for the spring, does not sponsor students to obtain a student visa for full-time 4-credit study. There is no appropriate visa category for students who are trying to come to the US for part-time study alone. And so there is no visa that we sponsor in the Harvard Extension School. Therefore, really the only course of study that is available to you are online-only course options, things that don't require you to physically enter the US in order to participate in the course. For those of you that really do want to come to the US in order to study, there is one avenue that is available to you. So we do student visa sponsorship for on-campus 4-credit study during Harvard Summer School. So that's the courses that are taught between June and July each year, depending upon what amount of credit you enroll in, for how many weeks you may enroll in. It may be possible for you to attain sponsorship for a student visa under that circumstance. But as we are here today, only talking about fall registration, there is no option available to you if you do not currently have an active visa, except for courses that meet online exclusively. Okay, we got through a lot of material. Now I want to go through some FAQs. These are some questions that I saw through the RSVP to this event to make sure that we hit these. And then I'm also going to go through the Q&A after this and see what questions you may have. For those of you that have joined us since this began, I do want to preface by saying this is a time for us to answer general questions that are applicable for everybody. I do know a lot of this information, 1, is dense, and 2, will raise a lot of personal questions for you that you're seeking to answer. We won't be discussing highly individualized circumstances here. I would really encourage folks to email us for that kind of help. But let me go over some of the questions we did see in the RSVP to this event. So the first question I saw was, for classes with an on-campus weekend, what do we need to do and prepare for that, especially in regards to COVID rules and requirements? Well, based on the earlier presentation, what you have to do is within 7 days of registering for that course with an on-campus weekend, you're going to submit to University Health Services Patient Portal a copy of your vaccination documentation that verifies that you've completed a full series of COVID vaccination and a booster in order for you to be able to stay in that course and attend that on-campus activity. That is the most important thing for you to prepare for that on-campus weekend. Second question was, does Harvard Extension School provide students with visas? I think I said this pretty emphatically just 2 slides ago, but I'll repeat it. No, the Harvard Extension School does not sponsor student visas. Technically, no school provides a student visa. It's something issued by the US consulates. But besides the technicality, there is no ability for us to be able to sponsor a student for study here in the US in the fall. Can I email you my medical documents instead of uploading them? Absolutely not. Please do not send us your personal medical information via email. Like we said, if it's COVID, you're going to send it to Patient Portal, University Health Services. If it's all of those other communicable diseases that you need to verify, that's going to be through that document uploader on My DCE. Those are the only 2 places that you should be sending your medical documents to. Question number 4 was a really great one. It was, how does Harvard define native language? And so I would encourage you to think about it from the perspective of what is your first language, or what is another thing that one of our colleagues says pretty frequently is, what is the language that you think and dream in, or what is the language that you were first exposed to? This is how we'll generally think about native language. I do know that for some students who have either a bilingual or multilingual identity, that this question can feel a little difficult to answer. So if you do have questions, depending upon your unique circumstance and want a little guidance on how best to maybe answer that question, you can certainly reach out to us and we're happy to talk you through it. Our email address there is proficiency@extension.harvard.edu. And I'll share again that email address in a moment as well. And this last question, I actually saw it for 2 reasons. So it's, I've lived and worked in an English-speaking country for X number of years, 10 years. Do I really need to prove English proficiency? And the answer is yes. It doesn't matter what your professional history is, so long as you indicate that your native language is something other than English, you will need to prove English proficiency. And that will mean that you need to submit to us either one of those qualifying transcripts or qualifying test score. There was a similar question actually about the critical reading and writing skills test as well. I've been living and working in the US. I'm a native English speaker. Why do I have to take this test to prove that I can read and write for these intensive courses? I hear the question. I myself was an English major and used to teach high school English, but it doesn't matter. If I wanted to take one of those courses, I would still need to take the critical reading and writing skills test myself. So unfortunately, there is no way around either of the 2 requirements, neither English proficiency nor that cruise test or one of its associated courses. With that, I'm going to open up the Q&A and take a look and see what questions may still be there. So give me one moment just to review. Okay, so I see one question. I'm reviewing the document upload form. Which one applies to uploading transcripts? The 2 listed are MB S102 transcript upload and then BIOS S15 transcript upload. So to this individual, so long as you indicated that English was not your native language, you should see a OEM English proficiency transcript option. If you don't see that as an option for you, I would actually ask you to email us at proficiency@extension.harvard.edu, just so that we can look into that, because that should absolutely be available to you. Okay, next question. If I took a course at Harvard Extension School prior to a class that requires the reading and writing placement, can I be exempt from taking the placement exam? So no, you can't be exempted from taking the placement exam just because you took another course here at Harvard Extension School. Each of the courses that I listed earlier do have that exam as a prerequisite. It doesn't matter if you've taken a dozen other courses at Harvard Extension School. For these particular intensive writing courses, they're still going to be looking for that placement exam or one of those alternate courses that we discussed as well. Okay. If a person in an H-1B visa, what conversation does he or she need to have with their sponsor? Honestly, the conversation with your sponsor is, I'm seeking to enroll part-time at Harvard Extension School. This is the course that I'm seeking to take, and see whether or not they're able to help you navigate whether that's going to be permissible for you under your current visa. That's really the start of the conversation. If after that, it's either confusing information that you get from your employer, or they're not entirely sure how best to advise you, that's when I would encourage you to reach back out to us and we can try to see whether we can assist any further. On the registration page, there is a reference to complete pre-registration on My DCE, and it is mentioned that there is a link there. I could not find this link. Could you please send it or provide instructions on how to find it? That's great. So pre-registration is something that everyone needs to complete prior to being able to register for classes. It's not going to be available, I think, until, I think they're aiming Friday is when it's going to go up on My DCE. So even though the info is there that you need to complete it, it hasn't actually launched yet. It usually happens about a week before registration occurs. So I would just give it a couple more days before you're actually going to see that on that My DCE portal. I am in the US on an H4 visa. Do I need to provide immunization information apart from COVID-19 vaccination? Yes. So all international students on a visa of any kind who enroll in courses will need to provide immunization information other than COVID-19 vaccination information. And so that's that same immunization form that I had talked about earlier that won't be available until July 15th for you to be able to complete with a medical professional. And that is the one that you will submit to the document upload portal instead of the patient portal. Okay, I'm going to call out. Are there any more questions that folks want to submit? Oh, I see one more. So what is the Harvard Extension School address to send my transcripts to? So if you're talking about address as an email address, you could do proficiency at extension.harvard.edu. If you're talking about physical address, we would ask you to please submit it through some electronic means instead. So whether that's uploading it to our document portal, or if your institution works with an organization like Parchment is a big transcript provider. They often have ways to do electronic delivery of transcripts as well, which is why I give you that email address that you could use. But I would ask that you not use a physical mail address to try to send it to us. The free writing course is self-paced. Is that correct? That is correct. Totally self-paced, self-guided. There's a handful of modules that you can complete. The how long does it take to go over all of the material question? That's difficult to say. I kind of have to leave that to you to how best to pace it for yourself. It is certainly something one could rush through very quickly. I think probably the more ideal thing would be to take a module a day to try to get through. And that might be the better way to handle it. But yeah, it's certainly something you could get through in a few hours time if you're really motivated to try to get through quickly. If you pass the cruise test, is it advisable to still take an Expo course? So that's a great question. It depends on a couple of things. So if you pass the cruise test, you get access to all of the courses that have it as a prerequisite that you could then take. You won't receive on a passing examination like a recommendation that you should also take another Expo course. That's not going to happen. At that point, once you've passed the cruise, it's really us saying, we think that you're prepared for any of these writing intensive courses. You can proceed to taking one of them. Some of those writing intensive courses are Expo classes. So that's the reason why I stuttered on the question. So it's not necessarily that we would advise you to take, it's just that it may be a course that you are interested to take and now have the option to be able to do. Okay. I'm pausing for a little bit longer in case there are more questions. I do see some of my staff are answering some of the questions that have also come in. So I just want to give you all just another moment to see if anything comes up. While I monitor that, I do want to move forward and just be able to give you the email addresses to contact us at. So each of these email addresses are broken down by content area. So whether you have questions about English proficiency, you can email the proficiency address here. Visas, immunizations, as you can see. The math placement email address is primarily for technical difficulties with actually accessing the test, or if something fails on you while you're taking it. So that's primarily a technical support email address. And then finally, if you have any questions about the cruise test, that inquiry at extension.harvard.edu is also a good one. Additional, so let me pause there just so that you have these. And as a reminder, again, we will be sending these slides to everybody that RSVP'd to the event, and a recording of this will be kept so that folks can review it at a later date as well. That usually comes out a few days after this concludes, so don't look for it immediately, but I promise it will come. Some additional resources, just because I do see questions about programs more generally, and some issues not necessarily related to enrollment requirements. So if you're new to Harvard Extension School, we have an enrollment services staff. They are your generalists that are able to answer questions about really everything. So you can reach them by contacting inquiry@extension.harvard.edu. But if you have specific questions related to pre-degree advising or admissions questions, they do have virtual office hours, which you can sign up for a session here at the link provided, or you can reach them via email. Additionally, if you had questions about a certificate in particular, whether it's an undergraduate or graduate, that would be available here. And virtual office hours for that office will be available during that period, Wednesdays 12 to 1 at that URL as well. I do see the question about whether the Q&A will be available in the recording. I will follow up on that and see if there's some way for us to be able to save it to make that available too. And final reminder, please, important dates. Since fall registration is fast approaching. Pre-registration, like I said, is hopefully opening at the end of the week, but it will open before July 15th ultimately. July 15th is when admitted degree candidates will be able to register in courses for the fall starting at 9 a.m. And then on Monday, July 18th at 9 a.m., course registration will open up for all of your students. And please do not forget that registration closes on Thursday, August 25th. And if there's any other deadlines that I can really hammer home for all of you today, it's one, August 18th is the English proficiency deadline to get guaranteed a review prior to registration closing. And the second one is if you're going to be registered in a course with on-campus components, you have 7 days to submit your immunization document. I said that pre-registration is going to open before July 15th. Thanks, David. And so I just want to thank all of you really for attending today. We really hope to see you either on campus or online sometime soon. One last time, this webinar has been recorded and we're going to share it with all of you as soon as we can, along with the slide deck. So thank you all for your time today. Thank you all for so many questions. I'm glad that we were able to get through so many of them. I hope you found it helpful. And we hope to see you around this fall.